Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. I want to introduce you to a project that we built a few years ago in the hand tool workshop. Now, when we build projects in that particular workshop, they were done entirely with hand tools. There's a minor exception, and I'll share that with you. But before I do that, I want to say a shout out to someone. His name is George Henry. Now, I try to call all of my customers. I have a fair bit of FaceTime or windshield time when I'm driving to one place or another, and I use that time to make these contacts. And George had bought a dovetail saw and a dovetail marking knife, but he was from somewhere in the UK, and the place is called Noonsborough, Shetland, and I had no idea where it was. So I called him up, and while I was talking to him, I looked it up on the map. Check that one out. He's way up there, but I was surprised how mild the weather was. Anyway, George, very nice to talk to you, and I'm going to send you a little bit of wood. One of the things you'll notice for a woodworker coming from Shetland, there are no trees in all of that place. It's all grass-covered hills. In fact, he was telling me that he was building a project out of a piece of driftwood that he found that he thinks came, he said it was from Finland, a piece of pine from Finland. So we take for granted all of the wood that I have in particular. We're surrounded by forests. So I'm going to put a little package together, a little care package we'll call it. All right, so this is a shaker wall cabinet. Nothing particularly fancy about it. It was a fun project. It's made out of black walnut, but it's been sitting on the wall in our living room, and it gets a lot of UV light, so the walnut has really changed color. That's the downside to it. Some of the things that I thought were interesting that we did. Let's look at the backside first. Obviously, it hangs on the wall, so I didn't want these supports to be too big. I wanted them to be nice and thin, dainty looking, but I was concerned that the holes weren't going to be strong enough. So what I did on the very back, you can't see it from the face, is I cut out a piece of very thin sheet metal, used double-sided tape to hold it in place with a couple of screws down here, just to give it that extra support. And it typically hangs from the top one, not the bottom one. On the back, I used shiplap. So these pieces all have a rabbet on each edge, so that as the wood shrinks and expands, you don't have to worry about things cracking. And then it's just a finish nail holding each one. So this finish nail, because the rabbet is on the other side of this finish nail holds this piece in place, and it holds that piece in place. And as it goes across the width, it can move as it needs to seasonally, and not a problem. So if we spin it around on this side, and what I did is I built the dovetail box first, and then I added the top and put a full bull nose. I think it's about 5/16 of diameter on the top, and then a half round, or a quarter round, sorry, on the bottom. So you get to see the dovetail sticking out there, but like I said, it's starting to fade so bad because of the UV light. Now on the door, I did something I don't normally do, and that is to leave square edges. The problem with leaving square edges is they're very susceptible to damage, and if things aren't perfectly lined up, it doesn't show well at all. So this one had to be done particularly carefully. Fairly simple frame and panel door, but the problem that I was that I had to work around is I have a lot of children, and I wanted to make a latch that was a little dressier than typically what was used on this style of cabinet. So I made my own. I turned using a piece of Gabon Ebony, and that was the only power tool used, but it's still a handheld chisel. And I made this knob, and then I used a piece of brass. This all had to be carved out, and that locks in here. But I knew that sooner or later one of the kids would end up closing this on the cabinet, and it would end up leaving a bad mark there. So if you look over here, I took a piece of brass, can't even remember where I got it, and I did it with a hacksaw and handheld drill and file, and I cut a little piece and then set it in there. You can hardly see it from the front side, but now you have that brass to protect, actually two things. Number one, to protect against this from occurring, but also it gives you a nice secure spot for that latch to land in. And then inside, I can't remember doing this, but apparently I took one piece, for those back pieces, I took one piece of wood and then ripped it down the middle so that the back piece would be thin, and that's why you can see that book matched effect. The shelf is fixed so it doesn't move. And then regular hinges on here. So that was the first time, I think, in any of our projects we'd actually mortise hinges in. But that's got to be done nice and neat, or it just looks terrible. So when you do that, and I used a small router plane to make sure that that got perfectly flush and those corners were nice and square. Actually, I signed it on there. I didn't even remember doing that. This is a solid wood panel, so that has to be allowed to move unencumbered, because it's a fair bit of wood. It's probably 18 inches wide. No, it's not. It might be 15 and a bit. But still, that's going to, seasonally, that can move quite a bit. A little corner stop right up in there just keeps it from closing too far. Keep it from hitting the edge of the shelf. Put it there, close it like that. Anyways, fun project. Can't remember how many hours. If you're interested in it, the entire build was all filmed. It's part of our, now we call it our Rob's hand tool library. So you go to our website, RobCosman.com, and it'll lead you right to that. Anyway, fun project. Didn't use up a lot of material, but it'll certainly it'll test your skill. One more thing here. I can't even remember why I did this, but if you look and see how this piece was partly dovetailed in there, and I don't remember why I did that, but there had to be a good reason. I'll have to go back and watch it and find out. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. See you, George.